At Coveros, we recognize that learning is a journey, not a destination. A trusted resource for organizations of all sizes, our companies have trained more than 30,000 software professionals, helping them on the road to what is next. With our live virtual learning platform, you and your team attend professional training courses right from your computer. Easy and quick access fits today's working style and eliminates expensive travel and long days away from current projects. We have a variety of tools built into the learning platform to engage learners through dynamic delivery and to facilitate a multi-directional flow of information. Our engineers and expert instructors share their real-world experience along with practical exercises to deliver an interactive online learning experience. Participants communicate in real time with the instructor, asking questions, providing comments, and engaging in class discussions. Access our most requested courses in topics like Agile, DevOps and Cloud Skills, software testing and test automation, internationally recognized certifications, and more. With a private live virtual class, your team gains flexibility in scheduling and class length. Course customizations and follow-on coaching can also be added, creating a learning experience that immediately applies new skills in existing projects. At Coveros, we deliver quality online training and virtual coaching that meets your budget, program schedules, and business goals. See more and get started today at coveros.com/learn.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexa. Hey, everybody. My name is Jeff Payne. Welcome to The Real Scoop on AI and Testing. Sorry for the delay, but we do have with us one of the participants, so we're going to move forward. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jeff Payne. I'm the CEO and founder of Coveros. Coveros helps organizations accelerate their delivery through Agile and DevOps principles. I speak a lot, I write a lot, and I also tweet a lot. So if you're interested in anything to do with Agile, DevOps, test automation, anything associated with app security, please follow me on Twitter. I'm at Jeffrey E. Payne.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm one of the founders of Pink Lion, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer and overlooking, new product development and just making sure our customers get what they want. I also have with me Rick Felice. He's one of the other founders. He's a Chief Operating Officer, and between Rick, Jennifer, and I, we've worked together for almost 10 years, 8 years. And we were consultants in the QA space. We've consulted with, I think probably hundreds of enterprises at this point. Seen a lot of different automation and testing challenges, and so we all decided to come together and start Pink Lion.
Great. Well, thanks. Welcome, guys. What I'm disappointed about is usually at the conferences, Jennifer does a lot of interviews at conferences. She interviews me all the time. I was really looking forward to turning the tables and getting a chance to interview her. But somehow she wiggled off the hook, so I guess I'm going to be interviewing you all instead. But before we do that, we do want to take a poll and see who's in the audience. You've heard a little bit about who we are. I'm going to open up a poll, and we want to find out about you. And so let me open up a poll. Just tell us what your primary role is in your organization. If we aren't showing your role, just mark it as other and put it into the chat so that you can be recognized as well. I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and do that, and then I'll broadcast the results. Awesome. Let me broadcast the results. I believe you can continue to update them. So here's what we have. No great surprise, right? This is a webinar on testing, specifically on how to leverage AI in testing. And it looks like at least the people that came on board, about 65% almost are related to test in your role. So not a great surprise. We have some Scrum Masters and some execs as well. Welcome, product owners, developers, as well as some few others. Thank you everyone for that. We're going to first talk about AI. What is it really and what is it not? And then we're going to talk specifically about what kinds of testing problems AI can help us with. And then how do we leverage it best in testing? How do we leverage AI to get benefits out of it for testing? We'll leave the technical aspects of the webinar by talking about, is AI a threat? You hear that a lot at conferences, right? Is it going to take my job, right? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll point you to some resources and some upcoming events that will get you smarter about AI and testing. And then we'll open it up to QA at the end. So let's jump right into it. Guys, tell me a little bit your perspective on, what do you consider to be AI? What's not AI? And is it real? Is it not real? What do you think about AI as a field and a discipline, and what's your perspective on it?
Well, AI is kind of I think it's an overused term in general. It's becoming kind of a marketing term these days, and I think a lot of what we are starting to see is artificial intelligence has been around for a while, but now we have the compute and we have cloud infrastructure, we have the creation of neural networks, and some of these newer innovations that allow true machine learning is more of what it is. So we can train machines to simulate a human brain, but it's a very primitive level human brain, I would say, at this point. And it's a lot of just feeding data inputs in, and then an AI brain predicts some kind of output, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that it's more about taking something that it's really more about something. It's a type of technology that's able to replicate the human thought process and make decisions. But what's kind of the caveat, or what we're seeing now, is there isn't a standard for it, and the AI is only able to make decisions based on what it's seen in the past. So it's not able to kind of fortune tell or future guess. It's not Skynet and what we see in the movies. There's a lot of differentiation between general AI versus narrow AI. And general AI is what you see in the movies, robots that talk, Terminators, things like that. Those things are not here. Transformers isn't real. Those may at one point become a reality, but not today. What is a reality is the narrow AI, stuff that's, you guys probably interact with it all the time and don't even realize it. The most common form is actually those chat bots when you go to websites, where there's that little pop-up in the corner that says, hey, do you have a question I can help you with? Those are actually bots that are sitting there waiting, and they know answers to questions, and they're going to then just guess at your question based on the words you put out there. And that's actually a form of AI that we can use today.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to testing and things like that, using AI for automation, for instance, that's a narrow AI. I mean, It's an AI that does one thing and one specific thing. And general AI will maybe come with quantum computing, but, we're not quite there. Even driverless cars are narrow AI.
Yeah, and that gets to machine learning, right? Can you describe, is machine learning what you're characterizing as kind of a technique that's being used to solve today's kinds of problems in AI? Explain what machine learning is for the audience and how it relates to AI as a discipline.
So machine learning is about having a human being discern a set of data that will be fed into a machine-like model, I guess is what we call it. So a model being a mock of a human brain. So you're literally teaching a machine certain things, but very specific things, right? It's not teaching itself. We're getting closer and closer to that, but really machine learning is training basically a neural network to do a set of things, like predict whether or not it sees a cat versus a bird in a picture, right?
Or staying in the driving kind of instance, it would be, machine learning would be talking about we'd be showing the car how to actually turn a corner. That would be part of a machine learning algorithm.
So it's really there's a lot of human input to it at this point. It requires a person, there's a little of your perspective or your bias on things is going to be fed into this machine. So it's really just like the fusion of human input and machine output.
And I know Jennifer always characterizes it as obviously machine learning is just one type of what is described as artificial intelligence, right? I mean, it's one particular approach, albeit a popular approach these days, right?
Right. So in the 80s and 90s, you had these ideas of how do we teach a machine to do certain things, but it really wasn't ready for it. And in this slide, you see as the compute gets better, and companies like Google are creating tensor processing units, and NVIDIA, if you guys have heard of that, that's a graphics card company who's really been fueling their growth through machine learning, and all those like hardware innovations are really allowing people to start building AIs in their basement, with a single computer and an internet connection. So that's really what the innovation is like. I think the idea of AI and some of the study on it has been around for over, a century at this point, but it's just never been able to be realized, right? And that's what this graphic shows here.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't say like it's been around like forever, like the 90s or something. I appreciate you doing that because I remember when the big AI craze hit in the mid to late 80s, right? Where PCPs, like special purpose machines that were supposed to, think like a human, first started to hit the market. Thinking Machines was a company that had specific technology that was supposed to be catering to artificial intelligence, and it became a pretty hot topic, as you show in this graph. Most of it, though, around other approaches to AI, and as you show here, really as computing power has increased, you mentioned NVIDIA, neural networks, right? Machine learning using neural networks has skyrocketed in terms of the approach. Is that a good way to characterize what's going on?
Absolutely. But I think it may be as disruptive as just the internet itself, right? And when you allow the everyday programmer to start building AI tooling relatively cheaply, it will get cheaper and cheaper. So one of the biggest barriers right now is just cost of compute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of people on the call right now have experienced the pain of like cloud computing price tags. So there is that barrier right now, but it's getting smaller and smaller by the day. So you think of that, the lower the barrier gets to creating AI tools, the more innovation and the more startups that we're starting to see. And people worry about like killing your jobs, but I think it's just going to kind of repurpose people's work and how they do their jobs, and hopefully it just kind of helps us do the things we enjoy and less of the things we are bored with or the redundant tasks, right?
Yep.
So I think it's just like the explosion of AI is just starting, and that's because everyday people easier to access.
Yeah, I like this quote that you all put in here about, everybody knows the Mark Andreessen quote, software is eating the world, right? And this is from, the NVIDIA executive that, software is eating the world, but then AI is going to eat software, right? Is the kind of mantra that the NVIDIA is pushing, certainly. And let's talk about now testing. So what are some of the testing problems that you all feel AI can solve, or at least can help, right? What are the things that it can do for us?
Very good. We were talking about narrow AI, right? So it's very good at taking over very specific tasks that are, and testing in general has a lot of like regression testing and testing features from 2 years ago. There's so much redundancy in that AI is a really good candidate for testing, and it's part of the reason why it's one of the first types of AI being embedded into app and software development teams, right? But I think, and that allows people to do a little more creative testing. I think one of the things that's happened is we start to test just requirements, and we're sometimes forgetting about quality and the big picture of what are we supposed to be doing as testers or developers and app teams. We want to make sure that users have a good quality experience. At the end of the day, what matters is that your users have a good experience, right? And so hopefully the machines can start to take off some of the redundant we have to test certain things to make sure nothing broke, and even with, federal guidelines and regulations, but maybe it frees up the human creativity. I mean, AI is nowhere near being able to be creative and make, a lot of the things that people make like critical decision making and being able to think out of the box and say, maybe this button shouldn't be here. It's technically passing in my test case, and that was the requirement, but I don't think the user understands that feature, right? And that's kind of this slide here is talking about is how important end user satisfaction, and it's getting more important every year as companies rely on software to make money for their business. And I mean, we all know if a page takes over, 3 seconds to load, we're hitting the back button, and that affects companies more and more every year. So hopefully AI can allow us to really use the true human power to make sure we have quality user experience.
Do you believe that? So one of the challenges in testing from an end user satisfaction perspective is you kind of need end users, right? To be able to measure that satisfaction. How does AI help simulate, emulate, repeat the end user experience, and how do you measure the quality of that? Or, I mean, how is testing or AI going to help that particular challenge?
Well, one of the things we're actually looking into at Pink Lion is using customer reviews to get real feedback and using AI to classify those reviews into categories, right? So, I mean, when certain companies get millions of app reviews, and there's no way a human being can really parse through all that information. Well, they could, but it would be a lot of work, right? And so what if you could use AI to look at the reviews and categorize them into like UX complaints, too many advertisements, there's a bug, it crashes. When you start to read this data that's already out there in the public, you realize that there's like a gold mine of information straight from your end user. And it's just sitting out there. And I think starting to think about how can we kind of change the way we think about QA and end user satisfaction using AI. And that's a really good example of, so I think there's just this data everywhere out there. And data, the explosion of data has really fueled AI explosion too, because like we were talking about training AI models and neural networks, those are useless without data. So like I think there's a lot of opportunity in using data.
That makes sense. I know some other challenges that, at least from talking to Jennifer, she thought AI could help were on this slide here. One was, tester fatigue, right? Meaning when you look at something over and over, and when you run a test over and over and over again, it's kind of like driving in your car and not really paying attention if you know where you're going, right? You get to where you're going and you almost don't even remember the trip. There's some risk in testing that can happen, right? That if you're just doing the same thing over and over as a tester, you're doing that manually, that you might miss some things if you're doing that repeatedly, right? And perhaps that's something obviously that that an AI solution, if it was performing that testing for you, is not going to fatigue. The other thing that Jennifer stressed when I chatted with her the other day was that there's never enough time to test, right? So unfortunately, we are trying to shift testing left, do more things early, but the reality is, even when you do that, there's going to be something that shows up near the end that's going to have to be done, or you can't effectively finish some types of testing until you have your entire system that you're planning to deploy. And she was talking about the fact that your test sampling, so the tests that you have time to do, you might pick the wrong ones to do. They're not representative of what a customer would typically do, or your performance testing might not be customer-like enough if you're stressed and pushed for time. How does AI address that, or how can it deal with performance issues and sampling issues that we have in testing?
Yeah, because everything's moving to be faster, right? Shift left, but we also have all these platforms and all these different variations we have to worry about, right? And honestly, I don't think people are going to be able to keep up with the explosion of that. Um, so I think using AI to take care of all that kind of thing, right? Where it's like, okay, we know we're going to need to run the same test on um, an iWatch, an iPhone, an Android phone, and then now we have smart TVs and all these different platforms that have software on them. We're going to have to leverage AI to measure performance across different devices, and because a lot of times you see at companies is like there's a lot of times we just say, well, we'll test the core ones that users are using, and we'll hope that the other platforms are okay, right? And at a certain point, we are going to be unable to do that. So I think AI will allow us to keep shifting left and do what we want to do. We want to go faster, we want to release faster, but we need to test it before it goes out.
A first slide that talks about some of the benefits that AI gives you in terms of the different types of things you might be able to improve.
So we're trying to actually over here, we're trying to figure out there are a lot of untested pieces of software, and there's some really big testing challenges that haven't been tapped yet. And this is an example with a ride-sharing company that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And you think of some of this challenge of you're renting a scooter and you're booking, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call have seen the explosion of these scooters in cities, and they're laying all over the streets. And but these companies have to test this, and it's a tricky problem because you're trying to test, okay, I want to make sure that when the person picks up the scooter and they scan the barcode, the scooter runs, and then when they hit the button on the app, when they're done riding, that the scooter locks. And then you need to take that to another level. Every city has different regulations on these scooters. And so that's a huge, complex testing challenge, right? And so we used AI in this case to simulate all these different variations. I mean, this company was actually having human beings go out, ride the scooter around the block, and then seeing that the app was tracking the GPS coordinates correctly, right? And that will only get you so far. Like, you can't have a person in every major city in the world. I mean, I guess you could. It would be expensive. But, and actually get the test coverage that you really need. So, I mean, you think of that, AI is really well suited to these really difficult problems. That's one of many. I mean, even when you talk about gaming, testing really highly animated visual software applications like a big game, that traditionally has been left alone just because it's such a complex problem. And now we're starting to look at how can we apply AI to play a game and test it. So there's a lot of really cool, it actually opens the door to a lot of really interesting testing problems.
And so I'm guessing what you're saying, are you saying that initially what Uber would do was basically send people out to ride their scooters and their bikes around, and then somebody would be watching to make sure see if the software app did what it was supposed to do? Is that really what they were doing to test originally?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so you basically, what I'm guessing you all did, just to give the audience a view, is so they must have been collecting data, or you all collected data from people riding the bikes, and then you fed it into a neural net to basically build a model of what a ride looks like, and then you replayed that. Is that kind of in simplistic terms how you would solve that problem with AI?
Basically, yeah. So we can take all the data from, I mean, it's anonymized data, right? But you can use all think of how many rides are going on around the world, and use that data to train an AI model. You hit it on the head, I think, and kind of reproduce scenarios. And that's what we really can do, like take actual user activity and actions on your application and then create tests from that.
Now, if somebody's just getting started, how much data do they need to get going? I mean, how do you help them or work with them to have enough information to get realistic information? Oh, hey, there's Jennifer.
Hi, sorry about that. I know you guys are doing awesome, but what I would say is to your point, Jeff, is the amount of data, how bots work when you get started with them. The first crawl, they've actually crawled, 70 to 80,000 mobile apps and websites. So they've got a lot of training data that's built in for at least the neural nets that we're utilizing right now, and those are the sophisticated ones. So they've got a lot of inherent data that's built. So for example, with a login, they've seen 70 to 80,000 logins. They already get how that works. Yours may be slightly different, but they're still going to understand it. So the first time you run bots, if we take Uber as an example, the first time it ran and trained, there was some stuff we had to teach it. But based on that training data sets that we have available, after the second or third run, and you've done a little bit of training, it's able to pick things up and then get smarter, and that net actually gets more mature time over time when you run it. So with AI, usually the first run gets you to about 60%, 50, 60% on average, just using base stats. Then the second run is going to get you like that, 70, third to fifth run in the neighborhood of 80. And then once you hit about 90% after about like a couple days or a week, it's diminishing returns like most other things. You can run it and run it and run it, and it'll maybe get to like 95, but it's not going to get much higher, right? So there's a diminishing return over time, but they train up really quickly with most types of websites or mobile apps. Where it gets real complicated, and this is where Andrew will keep me honest on it, but is things like games. So gaming systems take a lot longer to train. They're a lot more complex. They've got a lot more elements. So if you think about how many different even weapons are in a game, right, or characters or all of that, each of those things has to be labeled. Good news is with games, we won't tell you where it is, but we found a secret file that stores most of their labeled data, because that's your next big piece is, do you have the data you need labeled so that the bots can identify it based off the label.
Interesting. And I know you had another example here that was pretty fascinating. You want to talk a little bit about, what you were doing with timings and gestures and performance and whatnot for some of your customers, Jennifer?
What's pretty cool, there's a lot of really neat use cases right now in testing that we're seeing. So this one gives you, when it does do its training and you've told it to go test something, it gives you back some really great information inherently. So these screen captures you're seeing are actually an actual app. It's a real app. This is what it did. We told it basically step one, log in and then add a product to the cart. So just add something to your cart. We wanted to see how many steps it took it to get to cart. We also wanted to see how long it took on each of those steps. So it actually breaks it down, as you can see underneath. This step took 4 seconds, this one was 1, and then that last step, step 4, was over 7 seconds. So for people that are saying, we've all had this probably in testing where someone says, oh my gosh, it takes forever to log in. Well, now you're going to know all the steps in the login, and you're going to look at where it's hanging or what it's doing when it did that. The other nice part for us in testing is when we have to reproduce an issue or a defect, the bots automatically create these screen caps with these timings and different information. So you can just attach that in whatever you're using for defect creation to give a step-by-step, play-by-play of exactly what it did, what fields it clicked on, what product it got. You're getting all that information inherently from this. The other thing it does besides these screen caps is it creates a video. So you also have a video and these screen captures. And what we've found is for us, you're not spending as much time writing up defects. You can still give them pointers, but a lot of the work on that's done for you, which is pretty cool in my mind because I hate writing up defects.
No, I hear you. That's a good point. And I love systems that capture screens. Tell us a little bit about, here's an example you mentioned to me about performance and comparing, the performance of different organizations and kind of benchmarking where you stand using AI.
Yeah, so what's fun about this is what I think AI will do for our industry and testing in general and folks that enjoy, the profession of testing and quality assurance as a whole and creating quality products just as a person involved in that, whether you're a performance tester or a product owner. What's neat is you're getting a lot of analysis, not just on your own products, but if it's a publicly available app. So those of you out there that test banking apps, obviously, unless you have bank accounts at your competitors, that's going to be a little more challenging. Or you have a neighbor that's going to borrow you their bank account login. But as long as it's a publicly available app that you can get into, like here, the example is a retail app. So it's Adidas, Nike, and Under Armour. And you can maybe guess which company said, hey, I want to take a look at, what's going on with my app and I want to see where it's hanging up. And what you notice right away and what it can do is if you know who the competitors are you want to baseline against, in this case, it was Nike and Under Armour, you can go in and look at to do the exact same thing on your competitor sites. How long is it taking, how many steps to add a product to cart? And I'm sure as testers and even just detail-oriented folks that are on the call right now, you can see right away some trends here, a little bit of pattern. And I bet if any of you were responsible for the Adidas app, you'd want to maybe take a look at why it was taking almost 45 seconds when, even though you look at Nike where it's more steps than Under Armour, they're still getting the cart in 16 seconds. So you can see for Nike, speed is key, not having your users spend too much time, because they've done some analysis obviously on their consumer and what their top of mind items are, one of them being speed to add a product to cart. So this gives Adidas, as well as frankly Under Armour, some information on how to refine and hone their app. It also gives you that overall, how big is the app? What does it look like from a memory utilization perspective? Lots of different data that helps drive product decision making, which I think is also pretty critical. You now have in your hands some actionable data to take back and do some stuff with.
And you said something earlier, Jennifer, that sounds really key, and that is, when I think about a neural net, I always think about it as I need to create and build a neural net specifically for this data and for this app. And what I heard you say is that what you've been doing is building neural networks that are able to be at least initially applied to various apps, within some constraints, I'm guessing, and you can get going really quickly without having specifically a lot of specific data about this site. And you cited some statistics about how fast the neural network learns. Is that really the key here to applying AI, is to really start with something that's going to allow you to get off the ground very quickly without having to spend a boatload of time collecting data yourself?
Yeah, that's the nice part is when you go with something, this is what I always recommend. Some of the products out there don't have as mature neural nets. What a lot of the investment is that you're paying for with really good AI and ML tools is the amount of training they had to actually do to get to the point that they're at. But inherently, the really good ones, they've trained across thousands, tens of thousands of apps. So when they see yours, they're going to know a lot about your app without ever you having to tell it. So here with Adidas, Nike, and Under Armour, these apps have been running for multiple years on this particular product. So they already have that inherent information. But if you're a company that says, I'm a bank, we've done the same things once we get access inside to those systems, is because there's logins, because there's different fields, it doesn't take much for those to get up to speed either. They're just behind a firewall. So obviously they've got the data and all of that. If we can access it, it's run on those as well. So even if you're a large scale system like SAP or a bank, you can still apply this same model because the neural net has been trained. So you get the advantage of dropping in that neural net into your environment. Now, where a lot of people get scared is they say, oh, well, if I get all the advantage of that, how do other people get my data? And the answer is no. So if you do on-prem versions, these things are behind your firewall, they're secured, no one else is getting in and taking your data. So even the most secure systems that you guys can think of right now are able to use these types of solutions inside of them. So because they can be secured down.
That's great. Hey, one thing that we did not get a chance to discuss that I'd love for you to comment on, Jennifer, is the difference between a using AI in testing where where machine learning and your neural net is performing testing for you versus enabling or helping enable testing through some AI techniques. Can you discuss the difference between using AI to perform testing versus using AI to support or enable testing?
Yeah, what I think we have to look at this is, so I've seen some of the comments, right? We're not saying you can't manually do this. What I'm actually saying is you absolutely can manually do these types of things we're talking about if we all had an infinite amount of time and an infinite amount of capacity. But the reality of the challenge we're facing right now in the world in general is, and this isn't just a testing thing. I will tell you, being at the World Economic Forum this week, every industry, doctors, lawyers, it's impacting everyone. Every industry will be getting some form of AI layered on to do tasks because we can't democratize and scale at the level we need to and provide the level of support and quality that we need to if we don't get some virtual assistance. So what you should think of AI as is your virtual research assistant. It's going to go out and perform some of these very mundane manual tasks that, yes, you could absolutely do, but they are going to do it faster, 24/7 in all the environments you run, and be incredibly efficient at doing it. So that's really where we have to look of getting a strategy on where do we focus the AI. What we strongly believe is AI does not replace humans. We are going to need testers to do what they do best, which is their problem solving, their analysis, the cognitive reasoning, all of that stuff. So we're not saying here this takes your job. What we're saying is you could spend a lot of time doing a lot of things, but let's do the high value add tasks that only you can do, right? So if it's a job that you could do or manual could do, let's have AI help you, just like automation helps us. And you use both AI, automation, and then we really save the high order items, the critical thinking, the logic, the problem solving for us as humans, because AI isn't good at those things right now. And we are, and we want to leverage that and use that as what humans get to focus on. So if you ask me, I'll give you a simple example. Can I do my expense reports manually? Absolutely. Do I want to do that manually? No. I'd rather have a virtual assistant that grabs all my expenses, automatically dumps it in, sends it off, and gets me paid, and all I have to do is validate it. Then I can focus on things that the AI can't do and do those things instead. So I would say look at it as a tool and something that assists us as our virtual assistants. The other things that it does do, so when you manually do something, you are doing it. When you go into a different role or you become moved to a different team, now someone else needs to relearn how to do the job you were doing. If you're using AI to do that, the AI stays there, it can continue doing it, and you don't have to retrain it. So that's the other beautiful piece of this, right? Is it's perpetual. It's not a one and done. If you are out of the equation, it doesn't happen. This is a sustainable way to make sure those core things continue to happen, and is like another backup or assistant to us when we're not available, or to provide more work-life balance, or all the things we want to do so that you're not working 24/7.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one of the other things that you and I talked about was getting smarter, that it was important for testers to get smarter about AI. You want to comment on that and why that's important, not just for you personally, but for your organization and its strategic direction?
Yeah, one of the things we know, and like I said, don't even trust just Andrew or I, but Gartner runs tons and tons of research. So right now we know that the number one thing across the world with executives is a strategy that they think will be a game changer for 2020 is leveraging AI in their organizations. So what I will tell you is executives and C-levels are talking about it, they're working on it, and they're strategizing on how to do it. And I know in my roles, what was always frustrating is that if someone else builds the strategy but doesn't understand what you do or your job function or your role, it doesn't always fit what you need. So what I would say is education is key. Not to be fearful of it because you don't have the information, but to really do something like you're doing today, or joining a webinar or going to a conference. I think I talked about with you, Jeff, that I think with how quickly our technology is changing now, even going to a conference once a year, stuff can dramatically change in even 6 months now. It's a much more rapid cycle for new technologies coming into the market. So going more often is pretty important to get what's out there and what the new tech is that's being worked on.
And a lot of people are asking about, tools and where they can learn more about stuff. I know you're headed to Epic, which is a conference focused on agile testing, automation. There's going to be a healthy dose of AI sessions, tutorials, etc. It's in San Diego, April 22nd to 23rd. You want to comment on what you're doing at Epic, and how do people find you there, and how does that work?
Yeah, so at Epic, we're doing some stuff. So really, AI, ironically for us, starts with humans. And AI starts with understanding what a good fit for AI is in your organization. And not everything is a good fit. So it's getting a strategy around that. So we talk a lot about, I saw some of the questions around, can we talk tools and how do I get started? The first thing is educate yourself. And one of the things we do as an organization is go out and look at every tool that's out there. We compare them against other tools, what their capabilities are, what they do and don't do. But what I would say with AI, you don't start with the tool, you start with your pain. So if you're in an organization, and I know you can do it manually, but you don't have enough time, your release cycles are squished, you don't do enough testing, stuff is happening where you can't regress your systems. You can't test all the environments. You have data issues. Whatever those things are, start with where your challenge or your problem is, and then we work it from there to figure out where AI fits in that overall strategy. But you got to think of it as, where are my pain points? Where are my challenges? Then what do I want to solve? And then baby stepping into some of this to see how it works and what fits in your organization. But a lot of that you're getting at these conferences now, and I would suggest a tool agnostic approach. That's the one we take, where we're not telling you use this or this. We start with what's the problem and then help you understand what tools fit. Because one of the hard parts right now is, and Jeff, I don't know if you and Andrew talked about it earlier in the webinar, but AI doesn't right now just stand for artificial intelligence. One of the things a company did was renamed it to augmented intelligence. And augmented intelligence isn't the same thing as artificial intelligence. So what I would tell you is a lot of companies are using marketing terms and buzzwords. So education is really key. Going to these conferences, talking to someone who's tool agnostic to kind of understand what's available and what your challenge is, really important too. Because that's what's causing some of the distrust and the pain right now around AI, is not everything is true machine learning and artificial intelligence and a neural network. It's something different, and unless you've had experience with it, you may not know, and you want to get that information.
Yeah, no, and I know you're keynoting at Epic and hosting a big beach party with a recording artist, as I understand. So this is right on the beach in San Diego. We actually call this conference an experience because it's a lot more than just sessions and tutorials and things like that. There's going to be a lot of interaction between speakers and participants and speakers. As Jennifer mentioned, lots of people are going to be around that are knowledgeable about agile testing, AI, test automation. This is a great place to go and learn. We're going to give everybody who attended this webinar, you'll get an email, an opportunity to save 10% in addition to the early savings that are already out there for this conference. You'll get an email with a discount code that you can use for it. We're pretty excited about this event, and we're hoping that a lot of people join us there. There's some other learning opportunities going on as well, just around testing and automation in general. A couple of virtual training classes coming up that are in February and March, and some pre-conference training around all sorts of different testing topics that are going to happen at Epic. Before we get to questions, one note is we are going to follow this conversation on. I know there's been a lot of questions. We're going to do Q&A after this for those that you that can stay. For those of you that cannot, you should check out the Hub. So the Hub is a software professional community. It has over 4,000 members, all sorts of topics. It's free. You can go to hub.techwell.com. I'm headed there after this webinar. Anybody else here, I don't know if you can stop by or not, Jennifer, but we can talk about some of these things. It's going to be in the testing channel of the Hub, and it's, obviously it's a Slack channel, so you'll be able to log in later and see everything that was discussed if you have to run. But please check out that. And I do want to mention before we take questions with the time we have that our next webinar in this series is already set, and it's March 16th. If you're interested in leadership at all, you do not want to miss this webinar. Andy Glover spoke at our last Agile and DevOps Leadership Summit that we had associated with our Agile and DevOps conference in Orlando in November, and he got the highest score that we've ever had from someone doing a featured talk at the Leadership Summit. And we've had some great speakers and some great scores. He was fantastic, and I convinced him to follow that up with a webinar to talk about what he calls Netflix DevOps leadership secrets. But it's really, how does he think about leadership? How does Netflix think about leadership? And what are his, kind of best practices for being a good leader? I highly recommend you come if leadership is on your agenda to get smarter on this year.